Tyrannosaurus rex is objectively the most famous prehistoric animal known to science, popular amongst researchers, paleontology, enthusiasts, children, and the media alike. What makes this dinosaur so popular and well is without a doubt its legendary reputation as a colossal apex predator. Humans are impressed by large, powerful animals, and Tyrannosaurus certainly fits the bill. Surely, though, Tyrannosaurus must have been cautious about some things in life. Not all hunts run smoothly, and the Hell Creek Formation was in life a very dangerous place to be. In today's video, we will be taking a look at the animals Tyrannosaurus rex lived alongside that may have caused it to stop in its tracks. The animals that we will meet today are those that would have been capable of inflicting serious damage upon a hunting Tyrannosaurus rex, or those that in earlier stages of life may have opportunistically hunted the king of dinosaurs itself. Join us as we travel back to Hell Creek, as we meet the prehistoric animals that even the mighty Tyrannosaurus was afraid of. Triceratops is synonymous with Tyrannosaurus, often depicted as the animal's main food source. The two dinosaurs are typically shown locked in battle with one another, the predator attempting to make its way around the herbivore's immense weight and sharp horns to find a point to strike. While it is true that Tyrannosaurus rex did prey upon Triceratops, and that Triceratops were certainly numerous enough in Hell Creek to support a predator as massive as Tyrannosaurus, it is certain that not every hunt ended in success. For the theropod Triceratops were amongst the largest of the dinosaurs from the Hell Creek Formation, capable of reaching a length of around 8 to 9 m and weighing up to 10 metric tons. For reference, an African elephant, an animal that is considered too large to have any natural predators today, measures on average 4 m in length and weighs around 6 tons. This dinosaur was truly massive and was backed up with a great deal of muscle. Then consider that Triceratops was armed with not one but 3 horns on its brow and snout, more than capable of defending itself against an attacker. An animal of this size and structure without horns would have been more than capable of putting up a fight. But Triceratops was indeed one of the most powerful animals of its time. Triceratops' horns were used primarily for sparring with rivals and impressing members of the opposite sex for mating rights, but almost certainly came into play to an extent when the animal was cornered by a predator or in dire need of defending itself. While the horns were surprisingly delicate, there is little reason to believe that a distressed Triceratops, when circled by a hungry Tyrannosaurus, would not make the most of the weaponry it did. Of deer show this behavior today with their antlers when cornered, or when a deer feels particularly threatened, they may lash out with their headgear. Even if defense is not their main purpose, it makes sense then that when a Tyrannosaurus decided to hunt Triceratops, it would have needed to strategize, relying upon ambush techniques rather than speed. If the predator found itself outnumbered, there's a good chance it would avoid this potentially deadly scenario altogether, and perhaps go and tackle something a little more manageable. Ankylosaurus, the large, heavily armored herbivore from Hell Creek that was armed with a heavy tail club, can be placed in a similar category to Triceratops. Studies on another genus of Ankylosaurus show that the animals preferred to use their bony tail clubs to attack one another when competing for mating rights and territory, leading scientists to believe that their primary function was not to defend against predators. The mechanics and logistics of using such a weapon have been studied at length by paleontologists, and it is thought that these tools would have been more effective for sparring with rather than defending against. This being said, some ankylosaurs were capable of generating immense force with their tails, and some are believed to have been able to snap bone. There is a chance, as research is still ongoing as to how exactly these dinosaurs used their tails, that Ankylosaurus used its tail as a defensive tool against Tyrannosaurus. Such interactions have long been depicted in paleo art, and it is only recently that scientists have begun to bring them into question. But a particularly threatened or cornered Ankylosaurus may have opted to use its heavy weaponry against the legs, head, or flanks of an attacking Tyrannosaurus, potentially marking an early end to its hunt. Even if Ankylosaurus didn't use its clubbed tail as a defensive tool to fight off a hungry Tyrannosaurus, its armor may have been enough to put the predator off. While a Tyrannosaurus rex could easily cut through Ankylosaurus' weak points, it would stand little chance where the armor was at its thickest along the dorsal side of the animal. A Tyrannosaurus would need to have been highly accurate and agile if it was to overturn an Ankylosaurus before it managed to get into a defensive posture which, unless the animal was particularly hungry, may not have been worth the hassle, as it was with Triceratops. Perhaps Tyrannosaurus found itself in some situations that might have been a little too risky. By far the largest dinosaur of the Hell Creek Formation was Alamosaurus San Juan in Use, a huge saltosaurid that was capable of growing to an immense 26 m in length. This long-necked titanosaur is one of the generally lesser-known animals to have lived alongside Tyrannosaurus rex, and it is unlikely that a fully grown adult would be too threatened by the carnivore, especially if it was traveling as part of a herd 1-to-1. Even an adult Alamosaurus would outsize even the largest Tyrannosaurus rex specimens, who would need to be very well prepared for the difficult fight ahead. Should it choose to strike Alamosaurus' primary weapon in this hypothetical fight against a hungry Tyrannosaurus, would have been its weight, all 38 metric tons of it, making the most of the muscles in its immense body. The saurid would have literally been able to throw its weight around, lashing out at the attacking theropod with paleontology limbs and immense neck. And once the attacker was down, a very painful trampling research is still ongoing as to see whether or not large sauropods such as Alamosaurus could rear up on their hind legs. If they could, Alamosaurus would stand an even greater chance at beating its adversary, raising and lowering its forelimbs at the same time to potentially stamp down on the Tyrannosaurus. On the other hand, young, old, or injured Alamosaurus would have been a potentially bountiful meal for a hungry Tyrannosaurus. That much meat could reliably feed several Tyrannosaurus at once. But such opportunities were no doubt fleeting. Coming to our first theropod on today's list, we meet Dakotaraptor, one of the very largest of the dromaeosaur and one that lived alongside Tyrannosaurus in the Hell Creek Formation. Dakotaraptor was a much more heavily built dromaeosaur than its distant cousins such as Velociraptor and Atrociraptor, and as such it is thought to have relied upon its weight and strength rather than speed and agility to bring down prey. Adult Dakotaraptors may have competed with Tyrannosaurus rex for the same prey, which, if true, may have led the two species into direct conflict with one another. When times were tough, how would a Tyrannosaurus fare in combat with these unconventionally large dromaeosaur? However, one-on-one, there would be little doubt Tyrannosaurus would win. Its superior size and bite force would likely overwhelm the dromaeosaur before it could deliver a well-placed kick to the apex predator's hide. There is, however, plenty of ongoing discussion as to whether or not dromaeosaur lived and hunted in packs, a trope that has been extremely popular in paleontology media over the years. If this turned out to be true and Dakotaraptor individuals did indeed come together to hunt as part of a pack, the odds would be a little more tipped in the dromaeosaur favor. One raptor would have been easy, but 3 or 4 these were very large animals even by prehistoric standards, and each Dakotaraptor would have been armed with sharp sickle-like claws at the end of their hind limbs and sharp tearing teeth in their mouths. They would have been quicker than Tyrannosaurus, even if they weren't primarily built for speed, and potentially could have overwhelmed the animal quickly if enough members of the pack were present. Obviously, this theory relies upon other theories being true. It is likely that only a desperate Tyrannosaurus would go up against more than one Dakotaraptor in this setting, as it would not be wise to tangle with other large animals that are almost equally efficient at hunting. Only time will tell if this was even a considerable option. However, unfortunately, simply being the same species as another animal does not make you safe from it when it's desperate and hungry. Several dinosaur genera are thought to have exhibited cannibalistic tendencies when times were tough, and Tyrannosaurus rex is believed to have been no exception. Juvenile Tyrannosaurus rexes did not have it easy. All around them were animals that saw them as potential prey, and especially when they left their parents to venture out into the world alone, they were vulnerable potentially. The most dangerous animal to a small Tyrannosaurus rex would have been a large Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the most well-adapted apex predators the world has ever seen living right on your doorstep if a fully grown Tyrannosaurus was hungry enough and presented with the option. There is little doubt that a young member of the species would have made a suitable meal. As shocking as this might be, this is a relatively common behavior in the animal kingdom. In fact, in dinosaurs, it is known outside of the Tyrannosaurus genus Majungasaurus. The large Madagascan theropod is known to have eaten its own kin, and this behavior is even more common today. Lions, mantises, some species of spiders, polar bears, and even chimps, our closest relatives, engage in such acts for a young Tyrannosaurus. It would have been the crucitive. It is important to remember that Tyrannosaurus was an animal with a very diverse diet, and almost every hunt could have, and would have gone a different way. While some animals were objectively easier to take down than others, some Triceratops hunts, for example, may have been much easier than others, some of which were without a doubt fatal. The ancient natural world was as complex as the one we find ourselves in today, and we still have much to learn about it.